Okay. Okay. So looking at your career as a whole, you could argue that you have now come full circle on Coronation Street, where your late husband enjoyed so much success. In your opinion, how influential was Jack Rosenthal to the emergence of British television's social conscience? And on a personal level, how do you think this gritty style of drama benefited people from the North?
Yeah, great questions. I think he was, you have to remember that Jack started out as a copywriter, so he'd done his merchant navy, and he started out at Granada on the day that Granada opened. So I think he had an offer from Van Turner Ties at £9 a week, and Granada at £8 a week. And it was a struggle because he was, working class lad. So and Granada Television was pretty much a land site with a porter cabin on it, and he and Tony Warren, who created the street, started on the same day. So he would write things like, "And from the North we bring you people and places," that sort of thing. And then he began, he obviously wanted to write, and when Coronation Street started, that would be 63, I think, he watched the first episode, and Tony Warren rang and said, "What did you think?" And Jack said, "I think it's bloody marvellous. Can I write one?" And he said, so Jack wrote episode 13. And I think next week I go back to do episode 11184. So I'm not good at numbers, but that works out like 111,000 or something, does it? Anyway, the thing was that sentence, "from the North, this is Granada," was fantastically important, because we were always going to be second best, weren't we? Always. Still are, actually, as it happens. But when we watched it, it was completely revolutionary. I mean, we'd seen things like Meet the Groves, which was a soap, and a sort of family soap, and people, "Oh, hello, have you got a cup of tea? Oh, do sit." We'd seen that, and it was kind of quasi-real. But Corrie was real to us. And Minnie Caldwell and Martha and Ina Sharples were people who we met every day. And it was funny. And Pat Phoenix was a character, Elsie, with a shady past. And, we all had one of those in our little circle. And funnily enough, I was giving a speech the other night for Jewish Care. And I tell a story about how, as a young girl, 5, when my parents had people round for an evening, bridge rolls and coffee and cherry brandy and avocado and whiskey. And then my mother would get me up, and there'd be this circle of women, Minnie and Frida and Miriam and Jean. And they'd all be looking at me like, as I did my Alma Cogan, "You dreamboat, you lovable," as I did that. They'd all be, "Oh, isn't she marvellous?" And there would be one, just one. It was always the same woman who'd be like this. And that woman stayed in my head for 57 years. I've seen her at every first night. Not that she's there, but I'm aware of the difference between unmitigated love and someone who just can't stand you. You have to get used to that. That's how I am about some people, and it's the way it is. But at this dinner, this speech the other night, I said that everybody laughed, and I said there's this one woman who was just obviously thinking, "Get this performing midget off the stage," off the sideboard. Anyway, then we had question and answers, and a little woman puts her hand up. She's vaguely familiar. "Hello," she said. I'm Lucille Black, Nora's daughter. Who was the woman who you didn't like, who didn't like? Of course, it was her mother, out of the blue, 65 years after, you know, the event. So I said, oh, hello. I said, well, it was your mother, actually. No, it wasn't. I was just kidding. But when I'm telling you that story, so that you know you get what I'm saying, which is that we live, even in London, we live in a string of villages, and every village, as Dylan Thomas well knew, has its, you know, its braggart and its nymphomaniac and its soft touch and its bully. And, you know, this is life. This is life, whether it's in Clochemerle or it's in, you know, Love in the Time of Cholera, Gabriel Garcia. You know, we all recognize it when it's truthful. And Tony was very, very good. And it was very truthful. And people like Lawrence Olivier got down, well, he got down on his knees in front of Doris Speed in a corridor at Granada. Darling, brilliant, most phenomenal talent, you know. And Doris Speed said, oh, well, likewise, Sir Lawrence, manyfold. And we recognized it, just as, you know, you see something like The Wire, and you recognize its truthfulness. We watch a lot of shit, let's face it. And reality television is a lot of that. I believe that television was a medium created for the people, perhaps the first one really created for the common man, woman. But it's now by the common man. And so basically it's just, you know, it's just putting a video camera on you and me. And so it's lost something of its ability to tell stories truthfully, I think. And there's just a lot of manipulation goes on and editing for its own agenda. You know, we're going to see Nigel Farage now come out like smelling of sweet peas, and we all know that that's not the truth. But that's how it's going to be, because they're going to make him want to look the opposite of what we know he is, just to make people tune in. And the same with Strictly, you know. It's fun, wonderful entertainment, but I wouldn't do it, and I have to say no, because I know that the old bag leaves in week 6 or week 8. She leaves the week after Blackpool. So, you know, I'm not going to knock myself out for that, just to be, I'm not good at taking criticism in public at the best of times. So, to round up that rather raggedy answer to your question, you know, I inherited Coronation Street from Jack. His first episode went out number 13, and at the reading, Albert Tatlock, played by Jack Howarth, who I think was a grumpy old bugger, the PA looked at her stopwatch and she said, I think it's a bit over. And Jack Howarth said, aye, about 28 minutes over. So that was Jack's introduction. But he went on to write 150, and some of them, if you look at classic Corrie, some of them are just wonderful, because they're not really about anything. You know, we've come to a point in Corrie now where heads are being, you know, it's you know, people are getting murdered in knicker factories, and we know we're having domestic abuse and women, and anything that, you know, ticks the box of social problems in the late 21st century is going to be in your local soap. Whereas then you had the freedom to put Martha, Minnie and Ina in the snug and have a conversation about Ben-Hur. I mean, it's never been political, but, you know, I always like it when the women sit down and say, oh, Donald Trump, ain't his hair shocking? Or all those wonderful expressions that your parents came out with, my mother particularly. Oh, I say, doesn't a black skirt cover a multitude of sins? People talk like that. People talk like that, so, and we recognize it as true. Yeah. So I don't subscribe to the kind of, oh, you're in a soap, are you? No, well, you know, I don't subscribe to that. I feel I'm very lucky to have basically a great character. She is a great character, old school Corrie. She's not particularly nice, but you know, they keep trying to make her nicer, and I keep resisting because I don't think people change much. And it's a good enough job. It's a little hard. I mean, through COVID, oh my God, it was hard. Just not being allowed to be in the same room as anyone. You know, if you were filming in the Dobbs house, you could have someone on the sofa, someone at the door, and someone at the sink. You could never touch. You could never make a cup of tea. And I'm an actress who works with props. You know, I drive them mad because you have to, on Corrie, you have to ask if you want water to come out the sink or the till to work in the shop. You have to put in like a couple of days in advance. Oh, by the way, when we get to scene 116717, could I have water in the tap? You know, so you know, there's good and there's bad, but it's a nice group of people. It's nice being up north, and you know, I'll stick around for a bit longer. Yeah.
Josh said we won't ever see you eating kangaroo's genitalia then.
Oh, I've just put one out actually. Yeah, I like a kangaroo. Actually, once in Israel, I did see turkey testicles on the menu, and I managed to forbear. Yeah. No, I mean, why can't they find something else to put them through? Why don't they make them do Mastermind, or why is it always eating the anuses of extinct animals? Why?
Yeah, true.
So brain dead. Yeah. Because some people can swallow scorpions and some people can't. Doesn't mean to say that you're any better or brighter. Oh, I know, it's not for me. Yeah.
So, talking of social drama, in 1968, you were cast alongside Dennis Waterman and Susan George for the coming-of-age drama Up The Junction. In the era of Kathy Come Home and Saturday Night, Sunday Morning, to what extent did Up The Junction offer young people in the 60s something that represented the world that they live in? And how important were those social dramas in giving British television a harder edge?
Well, they began on television, didn't they? and were kind of glossied up a bit into films, Up The Junction. I mean, I look at it now and I think that was a very good film, actually. It was not well received at the time because, you know, it lacked Ken Loach, didn't it? I mean, he would have been off busy marching on some pro-Palestinian march, wouldn't it? Anyway, don't get bitter, Maureen. It would have been, you know, so the one on the television was hard-hitting, and the one we made was a little bit soft-edged. Peter Collinson, who later went on to make The Italian Job. So it looks great, and Adrian Poster, who disappeared as an actress, was brilliant in it, and Dennis was good, really good. You know, not straying far from his normal character, but he was good. And I, of course, was pretending to be Cockney for 13 weeks. I thought that if they found out I was from Hull, that they would fire me. But so I just kept it up, which was a bit wearing, yeah. Wearing, whatever. And then we had a premiere in Clapham. And I remember that I thought to myself, oh, I must look very different from the character I played. So I had my hair cut really, really short, like a French cut. And I looked shocking because I've got such a long neck and a small head. I looked shocking. And then the dress was white crepe, a sort of bag, like a jumpsuit, but with feet in white, turquoise, and green. I mean, there's no description that would do it justice, really. But I did look like some sort of mobile vase. Anyway, I remember dancing with Mick Jagger's brother, Chris, and it's the biggest film part I've ever had before or since, and I was totally miscast. So, you know, you look at what's going on now with kind of, what do we call it? You know, black face, yellow face, Jew face, and the idea of who can play what. Bradley Cooper's nose and all that. And it's quite interesting because I wasn't regarded as a Jewish actress then. I was just, you know, I was actually just, you know, a working class actress, middle class maybe, you know, who specialised a bit in comedy. Yeah.
So you joined Lawrence Olivier's prestigious theatre company in 1971. What sort of grounding did that offer you for a lifetime in entertainment?
Well, everything. I think everyone who was in that company, and there were a lot of us, including Tony Hopkins and Paul Schofield, Jonathan Miller and Anna Carteret, Joan Plowright and Maggie Smith, and you know, there was a rivalry between us and the Royal Shakespeare Company, who had Judi Dench and Barbara, what was her name? But we had, you know, we had Finney and Frank Finlay, and we were in repertoire, so we were doing 3 different plays a week, and I was understudying as well, so you were constantly at the theatre. And I'd met Jack, my husband, and he was a real northerner, but he'd come to London to be with me, which was quite a wrench. I mean, I realised that thinking back, you know, quite a wrench, because you are tended, you get regarded as a sign of treason if you leave the north, you know. But he loved London from the minute he saw it. And he went on to write The Knowledge, which is really a love story to London. The Knowledge being the taxi driver film, which so many, probably his best of his plays. Certainly one that you know, hasn't dated really, in spite of Uber. And so I would ride my bike from the flat we were renting in Hampstead. I would ride my bike to Waterloo with and then I'd be there from 10 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night when the show ended, and then I'd cycle home. And he used to put a little menu on the door, you know, 3 times fried chips, egg, sausage, you know, 11 o'clock, 11:30 at night. And that was it. I loved, I mean, I was in awe of Maggie Smith and Olivier and the people who were there, the great actors who were there. And I watched from the front of house, and I watched from the wings, and I watched Maggie Smith and thought, how does she do that? How does she make that archaic dialogue sound as if she's just making it up as she goes along? And there was a lot of Kenneth Williams in Maggie's performance because she'd worked with him a lot. So she somehow managed to, you know, to sort of turn that kind of thing into an absolute brilliant act. And it sort of worked, you know. So I'm still kind of in awe of her and Lady Olivier, Joan, who was a real mother hen to all the kids, and formed a lot of friendships there, which have remained. I must just get rid of this frog in my throat. Excuse me. Tony Hopkins played Knack there with Diana Rigg, and that I was one of the witches. I started getting a few parts, you know. I was one of the witches, and Tony Hopkins did not like the director, who's a great director, Michael Blakemore, whom I'm still in touch with, and have worked with 5 times. He didn't get on. Something about Tony's style, but he was brilliant as the Scottish King, and Diana Rigg too. But something happened when they got their costumes on. He looked like a diddy man, and somehow they looked like a cruet. It didn't work. I don't know. And he got on a plane and just left England. leaving his understudy to pick up the pieces, John Shrapnel. So I get quite pissed off when I see a great actor, of course, but I do get quite pissed off when I see him telling you about life and how to live it on Facebook. I just feel like saying, oh yeah, we had a tough time when you left.
Throughout your career, you frequently paid homage to your comedy heroine, Joyce Grenfell. This episode is going out, as we mentioned, as part of a Women in Comedy season. And for many, Joyce Grenfell was arguably the original funny woman. But what made her so unique, and what's her legacy?
Well, I think with comedians, generally, we tend to be slight outsiders who are looking from the outside in and commentating. And that means a difficult life because you're never in the moment. But it also means that you're constantly looking at things from an unusual, original angle. And from Joyce's point of view, of course, although, when it was announced I was playing her, I got some, let's say, interesting letters about Joyce's Englishness as opposed to mine. But she was 3/4 American. And so therefore, and also, she was part of the Astor family. So she could stand back and observe her fellow man terribly well, but also be a part of it enough to turn. And also, I mean, her working class characters, like all working class characters in British movies at that time, they were played by sort of middle upper class people, because not many working class people went to drama school or got into films. So you had this sort of, Joyce Carey in Brief Encounter. You had these cockneys who spoke like that. Oh, would you be lucky to change your room, Mrs.? And it was all a bit patronising. But Joyce had an aunt, a great aunt called Ruth Draper. Ruth Draper's totally forgotten nowadays, but she was an institution, actually. I don't know who she'd be comparable to, because she did a season in New York, a season in Paris, and a season in London of her monologues alone on stage for 21 years. And you went to see Draper when she came. Have you seen the Draper yet? Oh, and she just did 3 sketches. That was her show. And Joyce, being her great niece, the one time it was recorded, Joyce went with her. And she said to her afterwards, you are a consummate actress, Aunt Ruth. I don't know why anybody talks about us in the same breath. And Ruth said, they don't. But she did. She borrowed a lot from Ruth. I mean, we all borrow from the influences that we grow up with. But I tried to do a show once about the difference between Ruth's sketches and Joyce's. And I grew to love Joyce's. Even now, it's with me all the time, because I did the show so often with Dennis King at the piano. Even now, there's a memorial next week. For a famous man of the theatre, and I'll be doing a bit of Joyce just because it's apt and it's funny and it's short, and she's always bobbing along in my consciousness. And I do say to actors who have long periods out of work, find somebody. Find somebody. And there's so many amazing women, particularly, who were kind of ironed out of history. Whether they were women painters or women composers or women artists. So find one so that you've got a show for yourself when times are tough. I was lucky because, I had a husband who matched me, pound for pound sort of thing. So I am aware that I've had an easy passage. Yeah.
Another comedy hero was the late, great Victoria Wood. looking at your careers, it's easy to draw strong parallels between you both, but why do you think she remains so important to the story of British comedy?
I think Victoria was a cut above the rest because she wrote her own stuff, and that does make a big difference. If you're not relying on, different writers of different qualities, then you've only got yourself to blame. And she was a tough ringmaster. If you did a sketch for Vic, she sat about a foot and a half away from you and watched you. So it's quite daunting. But she lived near me, and occasionally we would go over and compare the best way of making chips. And
whoa, and what is the best way of making chips? Can't just go past that.
Well, it's a moot point, isn't it? Because it's like saying, what's the best way of making chicken soup? I use a whole boiling chicken. Yeah. And my chap, he uses a bag of giblets. And I have to say, the cost issue, his chicken soup is about 20 quid cheaper than mine. And it's less fuss. And it's very, very good. So, but with chips, Jack used to sort of, he favoured triple frying, so he would blanch them and then take them out, and then he'd fry them a bit and then take them out. And then when it was ready, when you got the rest of your dinner, then he'd very hot oil, clean oil, obviously. We used to do quite a lot of reusing when I was growing up. Clean oil and dry the chips, dry the potatoes before you put them in that oil, and salt them. Yeah. Good chips. Yeah. Well,
Josh says, what's your thoughts on air fryers, though?
How do you know? How do you know that's what he said?
What Josh said?
I suppose I will buy an air fryer at some point in my life, and I will stick it in a cupboard, and having used it twice, I'm sure it's a great thing to have, time-saving thing to have.
Well, it's good that we've sort of like hammered down the important parts of the interview.
Absolutely. This is the cookery section. Yeah.
Consumer advice.
I was actually watching someone yesterday on Facebook, and they put tomato ketchup into a frying pan in circles, going smaller and smaller, and they poured pancake batter into it. So when the pancake came out, so it's kind of swirls of red in there. So I thought, right. And then they took the pancake and they draped it over a glass. So it made a kind of bucket shape, frilly bucket shape. And then they fried leeks and then made a little hole in the leek and put an egg in. And then the leeks and the egg went in the pancake. I don't know. It's just, you don't need an air fryer. You just need a morning with nothing to do, don't you, really? No, I think I'll fry some leeks and put an egg in it and put it in the pancake. Yeah.
Josh just said it. Am I sure I didn't slip something in his drink, because he's found himself talking to Maureen Lipman about how to make chips.
That's better than it's better than Josh, better than talking about. And then you did the play, daddly daddly. How was Mr. Finney? It's better than that. I mean, we all know that what we do is a job. It's just a job. And when a bunch of actors get together, basically in the green room at Corrie, they're talking about mortgages, they're talking about drink, they're talking about their kids. Nobody's ever talking about show business, that's for sure.
So sitcom remains a notoriously difficult genre to perfect, and TV execs have spent a lifetime debating who's better to front them. But in 1979, you secured the title role in ITV's Agony. What were your first impressions of the role, and how important was that show in giving a platform to other women?
I suppose I didn't think about it in those terms. I was just jolly glad to get my own sitcom. And it was funny. And it was also very much, we now realise, ahead of its time, because it had the first normal gay couple who were just treated with respect and who were funny and friends. So it was. I was rather proud of Agony. I didn't think of it from a feminist point of view, really. We had the Jewish element with the wonderful Maria Charles, and it was written by a guy called Len Richman, whose mother had a sex shop in Los Angeles, and he had written it with Anna Raven, the Agony aunt. I think she's still an Agony aunt. And the first 6 episodes, you know, it was ahead of its time. We had a transgender, we had you know, bullying, we had all sorts of issues, and it was good. And then the second series was written by 3 other people, and the third series was written by, which was just the way it went, really. And it's never ever shown. It's as if it's been. It's as if it's been given sort of D notices by somebody. I'd love to find out who, because, you know, there's not a week goes by in the years since I've done it. Not a week goes by that I don't meet someone who's gay who said that show changed my life.
What do you think that show sort of did to move sitcom on? Do you think because it was very American, didn't it?
Sorry,
it tackled the taboos, didn't it?
It tackled the taboos, but it also it was an American slickness about it. It was colourful. It was tightly edited, and you know, it brought in a host in the central characters, and then bringing in a host of loonies. You know, every week different. So it took the same principle as a lot of British sitcoms, or Jack certainly. He loved a place of work and a group of men, and then every week, like the firemen in London's Burning, or the removal men in The Chain, you get your characters, your central characters, and then you can bring in all the crazy people from outside. It seemed to work, and in this one, it was very pastel, very vivid, and you know, you didn't linger on the jokes, and it was kind of up to date. So why they've buried it, I wish I knew.
So away from sitcom, you've been known to tread the boards a little bit, and you're probably best known for your role in Oklahoma. What reservations did you have about doing musical theatre, and how did your experiences with Olivier give you an advantage?
I never did a musical with Olivier. Oh, I did one, but he wasn't in it. Yeah, I played the second Randy in a play, a musical about musical about William Blake, which sank without trace. But I often think about that, actually. Oklahoma was, you know, I mean, I was sitting in the Ivy one night and having a crepe or something, and Trevor Nunn went past, and he stopped at the table and he said, "I think I might have something you will be interested in." So obviously I thought Hedda Gabler, didn't I? You know, Madame Ranevsky. But no, he thought of me for Aunt Ella. And that was kind of brilliant of him, because it, you know, you wouldn't immediately tick the box thinking of me for the Oklahoma matriarch. But I think he sensed that I'm quite good at holding a bunch of people together, keeping it, you know, and he wanted her to be the pivot of this show. And my God, you know, his first talk about the land rushes lasted 6 hours. And then we did sort of improvisations for a day. And Hugh Jackman was nobody. I mean, we'd never heard of him. We just knew he was drop dead gorgeous. I mean, when he started to take his shirt off to do the wrestling scene. We all had to be excused, most of the women. And they stayed a friend. It was a lovely show. And Trevor says now that he knew from day one it was going to be a hit. And my God, when you're in a hit, you know, the world and his mother comes, you know, the knock on the door, and it's Howard Keel. You know, oh, we got Ethel Merman with you. You know, it's just, it was triumphant. And funny. We had a great deal of laughter on it as well. And yeah, I had done a musical at Watford called Wonderful Town, which is a Leonard Bernstein musical. And I met the great man. He came to Watford. I couldn't believe my eyes. I can see him now with a turquoise macrame sweater and tan leather trousers and a leonine head of hair. And he said, took my face in his hands. And years later, I wrote, no, when we closed, I wrote him a letter telling him about the last night and how fantastic it was. We moved into town, and only by the grace of Bill Kenwright, bless his heart, and Dan Crawford, who was a theatrical maverick, and he put an advert in the Financial Times which said, Lipman and Bernstein, do you believe in this combination? I was mortified. Does he make me sound like I'm in a part of a tailor's shop? Dan, you can't do that. Anyway, somehow, with the help of Bill, we got it into town. And I wrote Bernstein this letter telling him how wonderful the last night was. And then 50 years later, I saw the letter in his book of letters. And my God, sometimes there is God so quickly, you know, you just think he kept my letter. My little, you know, 25-year-old soubrette letter saying, thank you for this share with. And there was a wonderful night where I just felt that everything was perfect. The thing about a musical is that there's just so many elements that there's always going to be something wrong. There's going to be a piece of major miscasting. There's going to be a song that's in the wrong place. There's going to be a dep in the orchestra because he got a better gig. And on this particular night, it was perfect. And I took my bows. And, you know, I was doing one. I was thinking, this is why I came into the business. This is the high point of my life. This could never be it. And as I walked to go off, the curtain came, I walked to go off, and Ray Lonnan playing the Sidney Chaplin role, he lifted the curtain up and he said to me, how much do you pay in car insurance? And it was a wonderful lesson in the idea that, you know, just because I think everything's perfect and artistic, someone else is on another planet altogether. You know, it's quite good to know things like that philosophically, I think.
Yeah.
I remember seeing the student
Josh said he remembers watching you do Oklahoma on the Royal Variety show.
Yeah.
What's that? How long ago was that?
Oh, 30 odd years, I suppose. It was odd. We had the Queen and Prince Philip came to see a rehearsal 6 months after we'd been playing it, and were suddenly called in for a rehearsal of the putting up of the barn. The farmer and the cowman should be friends. And it was because the Queen, she came to the rehearsal. Prince Philip went to see Chicago with all the girls straddling chairs in black underwear. And she came to see us raise the barn at 10:30 in the morning, half asleep, having raised it twice the day before. And there was a line, I remember when I got up on the gig at the beginning, there's a line which said, sure feel like the Queen sitting up here. And of course it got a round of applause, but only that night, because, you know, it wasn't supposed to be put in because of her. It was one of the lines. You know, no, it was a good experience. It was a wonderful, wonderful show. And I've done a few musicals. I did Thoroughly Modern Millie. I don't think I was great in that, but my husband was then quite ill, and I dressed up as a Chinese woman. I probably wouldn't be allowed to do that now. And I sort of didn't want to be there, really. I've done pantomime in McKellen's pantomime, and a very nice pantomime at Richmond, where I transmogrified from the Wicked Witch into Theresa May. My magic has vanished. My hair has gone grey. I've got leopard skin shoes. I'm Theresa May.
Did you do the dance?
The bob dance. Whatever you say, I have some admiration for Theresa May, quite a lot. And I just often think what a wonderful Prime Minister she would have been for lockdown. She would have put her head down and explored every avenue and been absolutely conscientious, as opposed to the shredded wheat man. Yeah.
She would have just been running through fields of wheat instead.
Well, possibly.
Yeah, in her hours exercise. So 1996, you starred in the critically acclaimed BBC drama Eskimo Day. What do you think it was about Jack Rosenthal's writing which was able to touch upon real life issues in such a delicate way?
Well, he mined his life, so everything he wrote was from experience. He was no magical realist, my Jack. From the first one, when he said to Peter Eckersley, the head of drama, I want to write something of my own. And Pete said, well, what do you want to, well, go and write something. And Jack said, yeah, but nothing's ever happened to me. He said, well, what has happened to you? Well, he said, I went to school, I got evacuated. Pete threw a pen across the desk and said, there you are, there's your story. And then there was a bar mitzvah boy, which was a sort of expose of how bar mitzvahs have transformed over the years into sort of perhaps not terribly, perhaps too materialistic. And it was a wonderful opening of the fourth wall. And you could do that in those days because Jewish people were the good guys then. And then he did his national service in a play, and the Eskimo Day was, towards the end of his life, in his late 60s, and he'd found, because he was at home and the kids saw so much of him and he saw so much of the kids, and I was both at home and out of home, he found, when they went to university, he found it really painful, and had sort of collapsed a bit, really. And it was interesting talking to the other actors, Tom Wilkinson and Anna Carteret, and most of them, their kids just went off, said bye, went off. But Jack went with Amy to her interviews, and he actually went with her to Manchester when she went to Manchester University, and she wouldn't let him go. So he stayed. Her dad stayed all through Freshers Week. Oh my God, how have I failed? And they just went out to dinner every night together while everybody else was joining societies and the things that people do to get away from their parents. And Amy, our daughter, is a playwright, and she's her world is universal, but very small, and she writes with incredible delicacy. So my son is also a writer, but much more to do with the world and speeches and, sort of science, really. So the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And certainly my granddaughter writes as if she's been sort of challenged by an A-bot and say, she hasn't written that. She can't have had those thoughts. And she does. She's a little philosopher, aged 11. It's just amazing stuff. So it is. Look, we're meant to create, aren't we? That's what we're here for. That's all we leave, whether it's an Etruscan vase or a pile of bones or a video. That's what we're here for. So
Josh's next question is actually, what do you feel Jack's legacy is?
Well, I think writers go in and out of fashion. And of course, for the past 25 years, there have been no plays on television. There have been only series. And that's all about ratings. But it also means that a lot of padding goes into each episode. You could tell the story in one, but you choose not to tell the story in one because then you won't get the same people switching on and not switching off and not going over to Netflix. So the return of the play, I think, will come. And as it's going to be 20 years since his death, I hope that some enterprising company will reshow his oeuvre, and there's a lot to show. I mean, Patang Yang Kipabang is the most romantic thing he ever wrote, and it's his love of cricket and his love of fair play is very important. And Alistair Steadman, excellent in that. And Spend, in which again he took a figure of abuse to the public, Vivian Nicholson, who won all that money on the pools, and then everything went wrong, and he made her into a real rounded, scarred, damaged, vivacious woman, played again by the fantastic Susan Littler, who left this earth far too soon. So he was always on the side of, if you like, failure. Failure was his genre. He saw glory in plain life and in ordinariness, and he would say there's no such thing as a boring person, because if you're that boring, it's really interesting. Yeah. So he did what Joyce did in a way, you know. He listened a lot, and he was never satisfied with his work. He rewrote and rewrote and rewrote. And of course, he also had some nightmares, because you do. The stage version of Bar Mitzvah Boy as a musical was not good, and his dealings with Barbra Streisand on Yentl, although according to her book she seemed to write it all herself rather than the 13 drafts that he wrote. You know, it was tough, and he said he would not work with her again, but he actually did. He went in as a play doctor on a film she made called The Prince of Tides. He said, I'll give you 5 days. That's it. And then I'm going. But, you know, he admired her. He admired her because he was a perfectionist as well, Virgo, you know, so he understood it. But it was challenging, I think, the word they use. How are we doing?
Yeah, we've got 3 more questions, if that's all right.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. I'll talk less.
Obviously, you were made a Dame in the 2020 Queen's Birthday Honours for services to charity, entertainment and the arts. In terms of your own career, how did this make you reflect on your achievements?
Yeah, I was shocked. And I know there's no empire, and I know even the memory of an empire is deeply unpopular. But I was very thrilled. And yes, you sort of can't say anything about your own progress because it just looks big-headed, and we're all very careful to be, you know, slightly self-deprecating so we don't look like actors. Yeah. But I am more and more aware that what I do is unique to me. I mean, I've been a useful actor because I've got a funny slant on things, and my mind is different. All actors' minds are different, but I'm part director, and very often you don't get the kind of direction you need. Certainly not on day-to-day television. Often you are battling with directors, but I think I've got a very precise knowledge of what the subtext is on any piece of work. Now, you can only be as good as the play you're doing. You can elevate it a bit, but you can't really make a sow's ear out of a silk purse. So I think I've been useful in my career, and I think that I got funny bones, and that is a help. I can hear where the laugh is. I can smell the timing, and I've seen vicars with the same thing, and rabbis and kids. Comedy timing is a lot to do with technique, and that's a rude word in our business. But you've interviewed Sheila; she's got it too, and television has found that it's quite good to hire a comic man or woman to front a show about going off on a barge or Gogglebox and stuff like that, because we'll hold it together. So I think I've been useful. I think I'm pretty unfashionable at the moment, and yet I seem to carry on, and Rose, the play I did of Martin Sherman's, which I started during lockdown, filmed it, and then took it to Hope Mill Theatre, and then to Park Theatre, and finally for 30 performances into the New Ambassadors. So it has had a West End run, and that's the best thing I've ever done. It was a single one woman, 80-year-old woman, sitting on a bench, sitting shiver, that's mourning, for somebody we don't know who until the end of the show. And it covered the history of the Jewish people in a very, very vibrant and brilliant and historical ways. I learned things I didn't know about what the British Mandate did to people fresh out of the concentration camps. And it really was. I'll never top that. And so if that's it, I'm very happy in my life. I have 2 grandkids and 2 fab kids and a beautiful partner. And if this is it, and he said to me a couple of weeks ago, because I'm running, I'm going to Manchester, and then I'm going to his place, and then I'm going to this place. And I sometimes get up in the night and I don't know where the toilet is, because I'm in so many different places. And I think, and he said to me the other day, why don't we take a gap year? We're both 77. Why don't we take a gap year? Well, what would I do? Nothing. We'll just get in the car and we'll just go off and we'll see things. And my innards just plunged, because what would I be if it wasn't an actor? I'd just have to be a nice person. I might find that a bit grim.
So lastly then, is that what's next for Maureen Lipman, a gap year?
Well, if he persuades me to do it, he's got a nice little Citroen, one of those that kind of bobs up when you get into it. If I have the courage, if I'm not frightened not to be somebody, just to be a person rather than be, a face. If I have the courage, then I'll do it, and come back and panic that no one will remember me. But it doesn't matter. There's a body of work there, and the last few years of one's life, you've got to live every minute. As you know, Josh, you're given certain qualities, and certain qualities are taken away from you. And I noticed that you're a very good listener, and that your condition dictates that you actually move about a lot less when you're listening. You the whole thing relaxes a bit.
Yeah.
And I take my hat off to you, Josh, for doing what you